Hi guys, it's Danny the Traveler, and welcome to another episode of the Rocky Road Show, but the podcast edition. And here, joining me doing the background vocals for our podcast edition is none other than Rocky the Traveler. So guys, today I want to go over our experience traveling from the US to the UK for the first time ever. And I'll say this right off the bat, it wasn't easy, but like any move, it took some effort, and in the end, it was worth it. So back in 2014, the 29-year-old version of me decided it was time for a change. So I packed my bags and I went off to study a master's degree in journalism over at the land of fish and chips, specifically Bournemouth University. Now, no one knows where Bournemouth is, so I'll just quickly say that it's a nice little beach town in the south of England, and it's pretty well known for its university. There I was, ready to jet off to the jolly old England, but of course I wasn't going to not take Rocky, aka my best friend, aka the most traveled bull terrier in the world, with me, so I had to figure out the long process of how to bring him into the United Kingdom from the United States. All I knew was that it was going to take some paperwork and of course, lots of umbrellas and raincoats. So I had a hope that since Rocky is an English bull terrier, that alone would suffice since he would be coming back to his homeland. But boy was I wrong. The Brits would not just greet Rocky with open arms and a pint. We needed to go through the long process just like any other pet. So I knew that the UK had some of the most strict rules when it came to bringing your dog in. Luckily they had decided to relax their entry rules back in 2012. And so pets no longer had to wait in a 6-month-long quarantine when they entered the UK, so long as you meet their new criteria. So me and Rocky were pretty determined to meet that criteria. All in all, it took a few months to get this done the right way. So if you're thinking about bringing your dog to the UK from the US, I will tell you about our experience starting from around the end of 2014 to January 2015, which is when Rocky officially arrived into the UK. Basically, it all boils down to making sure your pet passes the UK pet travel scheme and all the checks for entry into the UK. So I'm going to try to break this down for you into easily digestible chunks, just like I do when I feed Rocky a big old piece of meat. First of all, before Rocky could even pack a single piece of heavy-duty rain clothing, we had to make sure he was microchipped. This is very important in order to get into the UK. Luckily, we had Rocky microchipped the year before, so he was already ready for this part. And we had a vet complete the microchip process, and it met the standards of the International Organization for Standardization. However, I have read that there is an exception to the microchip rule, so I'll quickly go over it. And that is if your pet has been tattooed, and not the kind of tattoo that, sailors get, but the pet ID tattoo kind. And it has to have been from before 2011, 3 July 2011. And that tattoo is still legible, and your pet must have been vaccinated against rabies after it was tattooed. Now, speaking of rabies, what a scary word, right? Rabies. We had a rabies vaccination, and by we, I mean Rocky, not me, in July 2014, so just shortly before Rocky made his move. So the rules say that if your pet travels more than 12 months after the rabies vaccine, then your pet is going to need a rabies booster shot. According to the official USDA website, which I know, this is all boring and stuff, but after the primary rabies vaccination, a pet must wait 21 days before it is eligible to enter the UK or the EU. Now, the next big step was the pet's official veterinary certificate. This little certificate has a list of all the vet records and microchip information, vaccine stuff, if your dog was on Santa's nice or naughty list, etc., etc. Now, this is a bit tricky, but the certificate must be issued by a vet within 10 days of entering the UK. And once that's been issued, you have to get all of that signed by the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. Piece of cake, right? Now, before you're able to enter the UK, your dog must get tapeworm treatment done between 1 and 5 days before entering the UK. Your vet could, of course, do this for you. Well, not for you, but for your pet. Now, if that sounds like a whole lot of stuff to do just before the flight, then that's because it was. I remember running around from place to place, to the USDA office, to the vet, and on the phone with British Airways. More on that in a second. So once we got all that paperwork done, we put it in a huge folder, which ended up being pretty thick, like a pizza, and we kept it safe. So the next step is finally to get your flight ready. For us, we picked British Airways because I read that it had a great track record when it came to animal care and safety, which was, of course, the utmost importance for me and Rocky. And the price was pretty good too. Speaking of price, I don't remember exactly how much I paid for the whole thing exactly, but I do remember it was around $1,500 US, not including the price of the kennel, which was about $70 for your airline approved crate. Of course, you could always go and do this via a pet transport company, and they can do all of this stuff for you, but of course it's going to be much, much more expensive. So now in our case, I flew to London Heathrow the day before Rocky did, so I was not actually on the same plane with him. The rules say your pet must arrive in the UK no more than 5 days before or after you, or you have to follow a different set of rules. So I decided to fly there before he did rather than on the same plane. And fast forward, I had landed in London Heathrow. It was raining, of course, and big surprise there. And I put on a raincoat, and I slept in a hotel. Well, actually, I barely slept, as I was worried about Rocky the whole time. I must have called the airline about 10 times to check up on him. And once they landed, they confirmed to me that he would be ready in a matter of hours, and I was finally able to pick him up. And I was so relieved when they told me he was all right. And despite what was sure to be annoying phone calls for British Airways, they were super friendly. Now, let's touch on this pet arrival for a second. The UK's government website says the whole process from the time of your pet arriving to the airport to when you get them, when you're able to get them, is about 5 hours. So that's a long time to withhold your pees and poops. Well, not yours, but your pets. So make sure you or the person who's taking your dog to the airport can handle all the prep before the flight. Although I'm certain the animal reception center in Heathrow is pretty well equipped with relief areas. Anyway, once Rocky arrived, I had a rental car ready to go, and I picked him up from the London Heathrow Animal Reception Center. And when I picked him up, he seemed to be pretty wild. He was like, "What in the world is going on?" Eventually, Rocky was back to Rocky shortly after, and I was so excited to have him in this new country, his homeland, in fact, where adventure would await us. So there you have it, guys. That's how Rocky flew for the first time ever from the USA to the UK. And it was quite the ordeal, but just mostly paperwork to deal with. But before you decide to bring your dog to the UK from the US, because it is quite an ordeal for them as it is for you, I was pretty scared for Rocky in the cargo because you hear all these horror stories about what happens to them down there. But I had to bring Rocky since I was planning on living in England for a long time to do my master's, to travel, and to work. And so maybe you're not necessarily going for a long time, and if that's the case, then maybe you can just have someone take care of your dog for you instead of taking him to the UK. Especially if it's a short time that you're visiting England. It'll spare your pet so many hours of flight time. But if you're thinking of making that move permanently, or at least for a long time, and you want to take your dog with you from the US, then I would say it's absolutely worth it to get it done. Guys, if you have any more questions, let us know in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer it, as we do have this experience. So guys, thanks for watching us, and we'll see you on the next adventure.